Shabbat Shalom. We are beginning. Good evening. It's always a pleasure to gather. And we remember that when we first invented what we call a synagogue 2,300 years ago, the name that arose, Beit Knesset, was very deliberate. It wasn't called a Beit Tfilah, a house of prayer. It was called Beit Knesset. We're supposed to gather on many levels and for many reasons. But tonight we'll begin gathering first with a little bit of tefillah, of singing and of prayer, and then a little bit of learning as well. We begin on page number 5 in the Siddur in the book rests. On page 5, the Shalom Aleichem. It's in the book rest, and we do have 2 song sheets, which I'll explain in a little bit. But for now, we're beginning with the Shalom Aleichem on page number 5. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Asharet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei Amlochim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem l'shalom, malachei hashalom, malachei elyon. Mi melech, malachei amlochim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu l'shalom, malachei hashalom, malachei elyon. Mi melech, malachei amlochim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzedchem l'shalom, malachei hashalom, malachei elyon. Mi melech, malachei amlochim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. On page 11, L'chuna Ranana, beginning the Kabbalat Shabbat. L'chuna Ranana is a psalm. We have 150 Tehillim, psalms in the Bible. But there are 7, well, there's a tiny one, so it's 7 plus 1, so you could say 8, but it's so small, we call it part of number 7. So there's 7 psalms for Shabbat, and L'chuna Ranana is the first. We're on page number 11. L'chuna Ranana l'Adonai, Nari al-Itzur Yish'enu, Nikad Mafana b'Torah, Bizmiro Nari alo, Nikad Mafana b'Torah, Bizmiro Nari alo, Ki el Gadol Adonai umelech gadol al kol Elohim asher beyado mecharei haaretz v'toafot harim lo asher beyado mecharei haaretz v'toafot harim lo. And on page 12 on the English side. If only you would listen today to God's voice and not become hard-hearted like the people at Merivah, like that time at Massah in the desert, when your ancestors tried me and tested me, though they had seen what I had wrought. For 40 years I was troubled by that generation, and I said, these are people whose hearts have gone astray. They do not know my way. So in anger I swore they would not enter my rest. That opening stanza, if only you would listen today to God's voice and not become hard-hearted like your ancestors, that's kind of surprising. It must not have been written about people from Mobile, because all the ancestors whom we know and love in Mobile always grew right and raised us right. I think most of us would look back on our ancestors favorably, I hope. I think most of us would say our ancestors guided us with an openness, not a closed and a hard-hearted manner, but an open-hearted manner. So how do we make sense of this section, which is drawn from the Bible? And the answer is that the people who came out of the land of Egypt, as they were now wandering in the wilderness, were facing a very tough road. And maybe they were terrified. So maybe that changed who they were and how they were. So can you and I learn from people who are frightened? Can we peel away the fear and we realize people who may be presenting themselves as hard-hearted are not truly hard-hearted? Do you and I have what it takes to unlock something, to help strip away some of that fear? And if we do, then we're hearing God's voice. So customarily we sing a number of the Psalms, but today it's a different day. And so we have two song sheets. One is labeled Psalm 27 on the song sheet. The song sheet labeled Psalm 27. And I selected this passage, this is sung by Craig Taubman, because he's reminding us that there are sources of light in the world. And it may be that you and I might see darkness around us. What does it take for us to, again, strip away the darkness and see the light? The words are Adonai, Ori, V'ishi, Mimi, Ira, Adonai, Ma'os, Chayai, Mimi, Efchad. The top of page, the Psalm 27, the song sheet.
Adonai hori vishi mimi ira Adonai ma'oz chayai mimi efchad Adonai hori vishi mimi ira Adonai hori vishi mimi ira Adonai ma'oz chayai mimi efchad Adonai Ori Adonai Ori Ori Veishi Mimi Ira Adonai Ori Vishi Mimi Ira Adonai Ori Vishi Mimi Ira Adonai ma'oz chayai mimi efchad Adonai Ori.
When you have light inside yourself, will you be afraid of anyone or anything? Take hold of a light from outside yourself, the grandeur, the source of all reality. Say that the world was created for me, and take hold of that light, and will chase away the fear and the darkness. L'charodi on page 23, the first three stanzas, and on page 25, the concluding three stanzas. Lechadodi lekrat kala Pnei Shabbat nikabela Lechadodi lekrat kala Pnei Shabbat nikabela Shamor v'zachor b'dibor echad Yishmeyanu el hamyuchad Adonai echad Ushemo echad L'Shem ol tiferet tviliti la. Lecha dodi, lecha dodi lekrat kala. Pene Shabbat nekabelam, lecha dodi lekrat kala. Pene Shabbat nekabelam, lekrat Shabbat lechuven elcha. Ki mekor habracha merosh mikedem nesucha sof maaseh b'machshavat tchila lecha dodi lekrat kala pene Shabbat nekabelam lecha dodi lekrat kala pene Shabbat nekabala mikdash melech ir melucha komitzi mitoch hafecha rav lach shevet b'yemekabacha lo yachmol alayechem la lecha dodi lekrat kala pene Shabbat nekabelam lecha dodi lekrat kala pene Shabbat v'hayu lim shisa shosayich v'rachaku kol mevalayich yasis alayich Elohayich kimsos chatan al kala lecha dodi lekrat kala pene Shabbat nekabelam lecha dodi lekrat kala pene Shabbat nekabelam yamin osmo tifrotzi v'et Adonai ta'aritzi al yadish ben partzi v'nismecha v'nagila lecha dodi lekrat kala pene Shabbat nekabelam lecha dodi lekrat kala pene Shabbat nekabelam Boi v'shalom ateret bala, gam besimcha u'v'tzahala, toch emunei am sgula, boi chala, lecha dodi lekrat kala, pene Shabbat nekabela, lecha dodi lekrat kala, pene Shabbat nekabela. Guess who's here? Shabbat's here. Now you may be seated, but first Shabbat had to come in. That's why we rose to symbolically welcome Shabbat. And turning to page 27, you see the psalm for Shabbat. And now you understand the structure of this element of the Kabbalat Shabbat, because the Charodi is a song reminding us that when we sing, we're setting a stage for something glorious to happen. In this case, symbolically, Shabbat has joined us. Now we look at a piece from the Bible. This is a psalm. It's on page 27. And it's associated with Shabbat. As you know, there are 7 psalms that have been assigned to the days of the week. This is the psalm for Shabbat that's been recited for thousands of years. And before we share with you a melody that we've shared on a couple of occasions, you may not know it, but you'll catch it because it's very simple. And it's evocative. And it's caring, and it's loving, and it's sweet, and it's coming from a high school choir. Just a point. It highlights the words Tov Lahodot, the first 2 words of this opening line. Shabbat's here. You know, it's good to say thank you. And one of the elements of the Shabbat itself is to stop and to realize that a day is a beacon for gratitude. We Jews assign 24 hours every week to the mindset of being grateful for the creation of the universe. When you think about it, that's what Shabbat's all about. To be grateful for the creation of the universe and to find our place within. So if some of you don't yet recognize this melody, be willing to sing along and picture high school seniors, this is now about 12 years ago, it's called Nativ, having come together in a choral group and presenting this melody for us. It's a moment of gratitude.
Mizmor shir le'yom haShabbat.
Hopefully, in another number of years, if I have those years, I'll be able to better understand the connection between Tov Lo, which we just sang, and Tzadik Katamar Yifrach, the conclusion here. It's on page 28. For now, I think the connection point is this. We begin the psalm by reminding us that it's important to be grateful. And then we turn to the end of the psalm on page 28, and we say, when we reach that awareness of gratitude and appreciation, that's the doorway into being a tzaddik, one devoted to righteousness. And when you and I achieve that threshold experience, that quality, that stature, then you and I are going to be katamar yifrach. We're going to be like a tree that God is entrusting to beautify God's own courtyard. Page 28, the last stanza of the little red arrow on the Hebrew and also the transliteration side. Tzaddik katamar yifrach kerez balbanon yiskem shetulim beveit Adonai bechatzrot Eloheinu yafrichu od yenovon beseva deshenim verananim yeyo lehagid ki ashar Adonai tzori v'lo avlatobo. We rise now the Borchu on page 39A. The evening service beginning officially with the Borchu on page 39A. Baruch hu et Adonai Amavorach. Baruch Adonai Amavorach Le'olam Voed. You may be seated. Baruch atah Adonai, our God, sovereign of time and space, whose word brings the evening dusk, whose wisdom opens the gates of dawn, whose understanding changes the day's division, whose will sets the succession of seasons and arranges the stars in their places in the sky, who creates day and night, who rolls light before darkness and darkness from light, who makes day pass into night, who distinguishes day from night. Adonai Tzvaot is your name, living and ever-present God. May your rule be with us forever and ever. Baruch atah. El Chai v'Kayam, Tamidim lo chaleinu l'olam voed. Baruch atah Adonai, Hama'ariv Aravim. On page 40. Ahavat olam Beit Yisrael, Amcha Havta. Torah u'mitzvot, chukim u'mishpatim, otanu limadita. Al ken Adonai Eloheinu, b'shachveinu u'b'kumeinu, nasiach b'chukecha. V'nismach b'divrei Toratecha, u'b'mitzvotecha, le'olam va'ed. Ki em chayenu, ve'orech yameinu, ve'orech yameinu, u'v'hem negeh yomam v'laylam. V'avatecha tasir mimenu le'olamim. Baruch atah Adonai, ohev amo Yisrael. Remember the last phrase before the Shema. The Siddur is very confident that God, ohev amo Yisrael, God loves Israel. After that has been declared, then we respond with the Shema v'Ahavta. God's initiating the love of Israel. We respond with the Shema v'Ahavta. It's a two-way engagement, but God's initiating it. Ohev amo Yisrael, you just said it. You just said Amen. Shema, page 41. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem. Ve'avta et Adonai Elohecha, b'chol lebavcha, u'b'chol nafshecha, u'b'chol meodecha, ve'ayu hadvarim ha'ele, asher anochi mitzavecha yom al levavecha, v'shinantam levanecha, v'dibarta bam, v'shivtecha b'veitecha, u'v'lechtecha b'derech, u'v'shachbecha u'v'kumecha, u'geshartam liot al yadecha, v'hayu letotafot b'neinecha, Oktavtam al mezuzot beitecha uvisharecha. Moment of silence on page number 42. Adonai Elohechem emet. Michmoch is on page 44. Umalchuta beratzon kiblu aleim Moshe u'Miriam u'bnei Yisrael lechanu shira b'simcha rabba v'yamru chulam michamocha po'elim Adonai mikamocha nedar b'kodesh Naratilot ol seifele Malchutecha ra'uvanecha Bokeh yam lifnei Moshe Zeli anu v'yamro Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed V'ne'emar kifad Adonai et Yaakov Ugalo miyad chazai mimenu Baruch atah Adonai Gal Yisrael. On page 45, especially these past 6 months, when there is so much animosity and hostility, the Hashkivenu has never been more necessary. Hashkivenu is our call for all of us to be able to lay down at night when we get into our bed, to put our heads on our pillows, that we have a sense of calm and of peace. But that only comes with the hope, the prayer, we like to say the presumed knowledge that other people throughout the world as well are able to place their heads on their pillows with a sense of calm and reassurance and hope for peace. On page 45 on the English side, Hashkivenu Adonai our God, to sleep peacefully. Awaken us to life, O Sovereign. Spread over us your canopy of peace. Restore us with your good counsel, and save us for the sake of your name. Shield us. Remove from us enemies, pestilence, sword, starvation, and sorrow. Remove the evil forces that surround us. Shelter us in the shadow of your wings, for you, God, watch over and deliver us. And you, God, are sovereign, merciful, and compassionate. Ensure our going and coming for life and peace, now and forever. May you spread over us your canopy of peace, Baruch atah Adonai, who spreads the canopy of peace over us, over all the people, Israel, and over Jerusalem. Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha, Baruch atah Adonai, Hapores sukat shalom aleinu, V'al kol amo Yisrael, V'al Yerushalayim. Page 46. V'shamro v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam beini uvein b'nei Yisrael oti la'olam oti la'olam oti le'olam v'shamro v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et ha-shamayim v'et ha'aretz v'shamro v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam Uvayom hashvi Shabbat vayinafash Shabbat vayinafash Shabbat vayinafash V'shamro v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah V'yosher b'chayechon v'yomechon Uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael Ba'gala Uv'isman kariv V'imero Amen Yehi shemei Rabbah mevarach L'olam l'yolmei olmaya Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitparvim v'yinaseh v'yithadar v'yithalal Shemei d'kedusha brechu le'la mikol berchata v'shirata tush bechata v'nechemata da'amiron mi'olma V'meru Amen. Before we rise this evening for the silent prayer, occasionally I point out an element within the Siddur. In a moment we'll be rising and we'll be offering the silent prayer, which begins on page 47. And there are 7 brachot. But tonight, look at page number 50. This has been part of our vocabulary for almost 2,000 years. It's the 5th bracha of the Amidah on Shabbat. Restoration of Zion. That's a fancy word for saying we want to be safe in our home. Israel is our homeland. When this prayer was first written, Jewish people were captive and inferior to the Roman Empire. And their aspiration was that someday they would be autonomous and freely governing their own lives as Jews in their land. And for 17 or so centuries, it was a hope and a dream. And now in our own day, just 75 years ago, it's become a reality. But our homeland is not secure and not safe. So tonight, these next days, weeks, months, continue to pray for the safety of our people in our homeland. We rise, the traditional text, page 47 to 52, page 47 to 52, or an opportunity for a few moments of silent, private prayer. Tonight we have a special guest, Amos Davidovitz, so I'm going to ask Larry to step forward to make an introduction.
Right here?
Here, or where do you want to stand? I mean, you'll decide. Yeah.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Thank you, Rabbi. Amos Davidovitz is a lieutenant colonel in the IDF reserves. He participated in the
Do you want to stand? You want the microphone? What do you want? Okay, okay.
Shabbat Shalom. And thank you for having me. I would probably say that of my achievements in life that I'm Vicky's cousin. It probably takes precedent over everything else, but you know, it's the way it is. What I'm going to do is I'm going to briefly just tell you a little bit and then answer questions that you might have. I'm here on my own accord. I'm not a representative of the government. I'm not a representative of the army. When I finished I was called up on the 7th along with my son, who was also called up on the 7th. I was in Be'eri on the 8th. And I was in the army for 5 months. I didn't really see the news. I didn't know what was going on. I was busy doing my military tasks and just dealing with that. And then when I finished, and I came home, and I started seeing newspapers and reading and seeing the news, this is what I told my wife and my neighbors, I feel really bad for you. You guys have been watching the news the whole time. That must be really depressing because I haven't seen anything, so it was easier for me. And but I also understood that we have a very serious problem with the way what's going on in Israel is portrayed in the news. I'm a grandfather. I'm 65 years old. I'm a grandfather. I've been fighting since 1974. I've been through 4 wars, and I've never been worried like I'm worried right now. Because in the past it was me fighting the Syrians. Depending on what week it was of the year, I was either fighting the Syrians, the Jordanians, the Egyptians. I fought them all, but it was contained, and it was men in uniform fighting men in uniforms, and it was more or less a fair fight, and that's what it focused on. It focused on armies fighting each other. What I saw on the 7th and on the 8th was simply horrendous. Simply horrendous. I've been asked many times, as Larry stated, I did international peace work. I was involved in second track diplomacy. I just told you that I fought every nation around me. I also sat in negotiations with every nation around me, and not only dealing with peace in our country, but in the Balkans and in Africa and in other places. And so people ask me if what happened now has changed my perspective. No, it hasn't changed my political belief. What it has done is changed 2 things for me. One of them is I won't say that I lost faith in humanity, but what I saw makes no sense. I have no tools in my mental toolbox to explain to me and give reason or rhyme to what it is that I saw. The atrocity that I saw, the sheer meanness, is something that I could not explain. I myself, I'm not in post-trauma, I'm in trauma. I simply don't understand it. And I have no tools. When I first came home, the first time that I came home, I just sat in a chair facing the wall. My wife would come up to me and say, "You want something?" I just sat in the chair, looked at the wall for a few hours, and then I had no tools. I don't know what happened. I know exactly what happened. I just can't put it into any framework of humanity that I have known. The second thing was these tunnels. I don't know what you see and what you know, but there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles of tunnels underneath Gaza. And when I saw that, I understood that the Hamas simply stole the future of the people of Gaza. That's what they did. They took all the money. The Palestinians are the largest recipients of foreign aid of any group of people on the planet for over 4 decades. They took that money, they stole it, they put it into a useless fortress underground. Why useless? Because what did they get out of it? They got everything that was above ground destroyed. And they have scores and thousands of people that are dead. Didn't help them. And this, to me, this terrible form of governance is a waste of humanity. It's a waste for humanity. All of this money could have gone to be doing things that would have improved the life of the Palestinians and just made the world a better place. I know that you living here and not having been part of this fight have a lot of questions. And these questions, you hear them on the news all the time, and they talk about these things. So I want to say something before I start. Before I came here, I went to a friend of mine who's a general in the Southern Command. He's a good friend. I trust him completely. He's a very good person and very honest. And I said to him, Gil, tell me, this whole thing about aid, the world is saying that we're not letting aid go through, there's not enough aid, there's not this. And I said, tell me what is happening. And he said, Amos, we are bending over backwards to get aid into Gaza. There's 150, at least every day, 150 trucks going into Gaza. The problem is not getting the aid into Gaza, the problem is getting the aid to the people of Gaza, because it gets stolen by the Hamas. Before the war, a kilo of flour would cost 5 shekels, $1.50. Now it's 75 shekels. But it's flour that you pay for already. This is foreign aid. The people of Gaza should be getting it for free. But the Hamas is stealing it and selling it to them. So it's not that there isn't food. The food just isn't getting to where it needs to go. That's one thing. Another thing is movement within Gaza. I was responsible, or my unit, not me individually, because I'm already a lieutenant colonel, so I don't stand at checkpoints anymore. But I was responsible for both the 2 main humanitarian crossroads, one along the sea and one halfway through on the main road that goes north and south in Gaza. And I can tell you, because I saw it with my own 2 eyes and I was responsible for it and I signed on the papers, that these crossroads, these humanitarian passageways, they were monitored, of course, so that we would be able to make sure that there's no terrorists coming through and so on and so forth. But there was freedom of movement as far as we were concerned. The problem was that the Hamas didn't want people to go from place to place, and we had to protect the Palestinians from the Hamas. There's an accusation about genocide. The definition of genocide is the annihilation or the effort to annihilate the people for an affiliation of some sort. It could be religion, it could be race, it could be all the redheads or whatever. And so there was an act of genocide that happened. It happened on the 7th of October. The Hamas went to kill Jews. They didn't go to kill soldiers. They didn't go to capture army bases. They went to kill Jews. Okay, so they didn't destroy the state of Israel, which would have been genocide, but what they did is their act and their intention was such. I have read personally, not secondhand, I personally have read the battle plans of the Israeli army, the battle plans of the Southern Command, the battle plans of the 99th Division, the division that I belong to, and the battle plans of all the brigades underneath us. And I can tell you, unequivocally, without any doubt, the battle orders of the Israeli army are to destroy the Hamas, destroy their infrastructure, kill the soldiers themselves, and protect the civilian population as much as possible, and not to do harm to infrastructure and buildings unless it is a tactical imperative. War is not a nice business, and people are going to die. When we look at the issue of proportionality in warfare, it is not you kill 5 people, I kill 5 people, you kill 10 people, I kill 10 people, you kill a bunch of women, I kill a bunch of women. No, that's not what proportionality means in warfare. What proportionality means in warfare is that myself as a field commander, when I see a target and I understand that there is going to be collateral damage, in other words, not the target that I intend on hitting, but maybe somebody else along the sides is going to die, that it is worth the target it's worthwhile from a tactical point of view. I'll give you a simple example. If I see Ahmad, the Hamasnik, standing there with an AK-47, and he's just a foot soldier, and there's 3 other people standing around him, according to the rules of war, of proportionality, I'm not allowed to kill him. Why? Because just to get the pawn, it's not worthwhile killing 3 other people. But if he's the brigade commander, I'm allowed to do it. Why? Because cutting off the head of the command chain, that's really super important. And according to the rules of war, that is a proportional action. It has nothing to do with numbers, nothing at all. But numbers are very important, and you hear them in the news all the time. What we are fighting right now is something that is called the war amongst the people. There's a book by a guy named Smith, if you're interested in it. And according to what's accepted amongst militaries in the world, and also the academics that research this stuff, the number in this type of warfare, urban warfare, of the war amongst the people, for every combatant killed, there's somewhere between 4 to 7 civilians killed. That's the number. That's the way it works. Don't start a war, that won't happen. You started it, it's going to be 1 to, let's say 5, just because it's somewhere in the middle. If we accept the numbers of Hamas, which I do not accept, but let's say we use the numbers of Hamas simply because there's the numbers that are out there, there's 30,000 people that have been killed. Israel says that it's killed 13,000 terrorists. Let's say they're wrong and they only killed 10,000, and it's also a lot easier for me to do the math, so I'm going to leave it like that. So what we have is 1 to 2. For every combatant killed, there are 2 civilians being killed. That these 2 civilians are killed is terrible, but it's a war, and this is what happens in warfare. This is what it's about. It's not going to be different. So if this is the number, if it's 1 to 2 and not 1 to 5 or 1 to 7, that means that according to the numbers of Hamas, Israel is bending over backwards to make sure that we are limiting the casualties as much as possible. I have spent my whole life either dealing with peace or dealing with the alleviation of suffering. During this war, while I was fighting this war, I got people out of Gaza that I know who were good people. I got them into Egypt. When the Ramadan started, I collected money and I sent it to people in Gaza that I knew that were hungry. Because as no matter what happened beforehand, the Hamas, during Ramadan, it's worse. Because they don't eat during the day, so they're going to store all the food underneath. And if you don't belong to the Hamas or you're not affiliated with Hamas, you're going to get bubkas. You get nothing, nada, garnished. And so these people, they're going to starve. Not because there's not food going in, it's not getting to them. So I sent in food to Gaza. I sent in money. It's an interesting thing, because I send in a very limited amount. Why? If I send in every time $300, I can get it underneath the table. If I would give them $300,000, then the Hamas would know about it immediately. They would first of all kill them all. Second of all, they would take it. It has to go in small dribbles. Otherwise, the Hamas would take that also. So, last sentence, and then I'll answer whatever it is that you want. We're sitting in a synagogue. It's Shabbat B'Erev. Your community is kind of special because you also do this interfaith work, which is most communities don't do. The rabbi beforehand was talking about Shabbat and about peace, shalom. And we want to see ourselves, you want to see yourselves as Jews, as part of the Jewish world, as, let's say not righteous, but at least decent human beings. I can tell you from first-hand experience, having dealt with war in the Balkans and having dealt with wars in Africa and having dealt with wars in Asia and having dealt with wars in Israel, I can tell you, first-hand experience, what Israel is doing is unique in military history, and Israel is bending over backwards to make sure that that unnecessary people don't die. Does that mean that every single Israeli soldier is doing that? No, of course, because we have a draft. Everybody goes to the army. And some people are schmucks. It's a synagogue, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. Forgive me. Some people, we get everybody. So you get you're going to get the racists, you're going to get the people who, what we do with it is also a different story. I said it was last thing before, and one last thing, and then I will do last thing. There was a video clip that some soldier went into a shop and started busting up the shop in Gaza. And so the kid's an idiot 3 times. First of all, he had an order, the soldiers were told not to do stuff like that. Second of all, he made a video of it, which is, you have to be a special level of stupid. But then to outdo himself, he put it on TikTok. Okay? And so what did the Israeli army do? The world jumped on it. They said, the Hamas and so on, they said, oh, here, look what the Israelis are doing. What the Israeli army did is they kicked them out of the army. Because you're not allowed to do that. They took a combat, I assume that none of you are combat soldiers, but if you're taking a combat soldier in the middle of a war out of his unit and saying, no, you're not worthy of carrying a rifle in the name of the Israeli army, that is the most degrading thing that can happen to you. But that's what we do. If you're going to mess up, if you're going to do what you're told not to do, then you can't be with us. As opposed to what happened on the 7th. On the 7th, they went out of their way to do things that are revolting and disgusting. Okay. I said that was going to be the last thing. Any questions? Does somebody want to? Yeah.
I appreciate your coming here tonight and sharing your thoughts and experiences with us. I've been following the news somewhat, and it is troubling in many respects. But I think Israel is on target or on the path to go in and clean as much of Hamas out of Rafah as they can. And that's gonna be a very traumatic situation. There's gonna be a lot of bad stuff about Israel in the news. And in my view, we just need to just hang in there and stick with Israel and not pay attention to all of that noise that's going to come, because Israel has to finish the job. Do you agree with that?
Okay. The military, we live in a democracy in Iran, and the military is subservient to the political directives. The Israeli army was told to destroy the Hamas. In other words, they have 5 brigades and 22 divisions, battalions. Our job is to destroy that. We have to get them all. There's about 3 of them left in Rafah. So if we're going to stay with the orders that we got beforehand, yes, we have to do that. Otherwise, we're not going to finish destroying the Hamas. If the government decides, no, we're going to have a hostage exchange or whatever, and then that's a political decision, and then that doesn't have to happen. Do I think that it should happen? That we should destroy these battalions? Yes, I do. At any political price? I'm not sure. One of the issues that I think is very, very, very problematic and is going to be detrimental for everything in the future is that the Hamas and the Palestinians and the whole Arab world is not held accountable for what it does. You can't, it's like raising children. It's not that they're children, but it's like raising children. If you let your kid get away with everything all the time, then in the end, he's not going to learn anything, or he or she, and they're going to get into trouble. No, you need to stop them every so often and say, no, this is where the buck stops, and you have to take responsibility. And I don't see that happening, and therefore I think that it's as close as we get to imperative to destroy those battalions. We can do it differently. Now we're using a lot more special forces and small units instead of using heavier equipment and the Air Force as we did in the beginning. But there's other tactical reasons which I can explain if we decide that this is going to go on much longer. But yeah, I think you're right. Yes.
Do you see any leader emerging from the Gazans that somehow could take some leadership role?
Okay. The future.
Yes.
What I would say has to happen, and what is, I don't know if it's feasible, but it's somewhat feasible. And it has to do with what I just said beforehand, because they're not taken to task on what it is that they don't do. Right? As I already said, the Palestinians are the largest recipients of foreign aid on the planet, and they're poor. That's because something's happening to them. So what should happen? I personally think that what should happen is that, again, I don't represent the government, I don't represent the army, I represent nobody whatsoever except ours. Okay? So what I think should happen is that we should finish getting rid of Hamas as much as we can, destroying their infrastructure and just killing as many of them as we possibly can. It doesn't sound nice, but that's what we have to do with these people. I once had to deal with ISIS, and I told my soldiers, listen, these guys are nuts. There's only one thing to do with them, and that is kill them. Because they all want to commit suicide anyhow, so we might as well die over there and not next to me. But, so what I think should happen is I think Gaza should be rebuilt. I want the people of Gaza to have a future. I want them to have hope. Humanity cannot live without hope. Nobody can live without hope. So I want them to have a future. But I don't trust them at all. Why? Because I just lost 1,400 people, and that was just on the first day, not what happened afterwards. I think now we're up to like 260 soldiers who have died in the fight. You people have to talk to your congressmen and your senators and the administration here and say, for every kilo of cement that goes into Gaza, it is audited and you know what happens to it. Every meter or every foot of wire and every foot of piping, you know exactly where it goes. That this goes to rebuilding Gaza for the people of Gaza and not the Hamas. The Hamas is not a partner. Why is the Hamas not a partner? Because it's very simple. You read the charter of the Hamas and then you know exactly why. What does it say? Once you destroy this database, don't kill all the Jews. You know what? I'm not going to. That's not somebody I can talk to. So there has to be somebody else to talk to. What I would say at the beginning is to take, since the international community is going to be paying for all of this, because nobody's going to take the $1 billion that Hania has stashed away. That's not going to happen. He's going to have his $1 billion. But since the international community is going to pay for this, the international community say we're going to pay for it and we're going to administer it. We're going to run this area until we can make a technocratic local governance. What I would do is I would make an educational system. They have to change our educational system, and it cannot be UNRWA. I don't know what you know about UNRWA, but UNRWA is a unique organization. The United Nations Working Relief Agency that runs the stuff in Gaza and the West Bank. All refugees on the planet are taken care of by an organization called the United Nations High Commission for Refugees. Everybody. All of them. And all of them are taken care of. Their task is within 5 years to solve the problem. They don't do it, but that's what their task is. To resettle them, all kinds of different ideas. The people who run it, you say there's a problem in Rwanda, the people who run it aren't people from Rwanda. They're going to be people from Spain, Portugal, or US, or some other place, so that are not involved in the conflict, so that they can manage the stuff objectively. That is true for all the refugees on the planet, excluding the Palestinians. Palestinians, it is run by UNRWA. The task of UNRWA is to maintain them until they can go home. Who runs UNRWA, or who's the staff of UNRWA? Palestinians. There's 30,000 Palestinians who work for UNRWA. They have an invested interest in this continuum. They are responsible for the educational curriculum of all the UNRWA schools. You don't want to read that in the educational curriculum, it's a little bit problematic, especially if you happen to be Jewish or Israeli. What I would say is change that. Change the educational system. In the end, if people are taught to hate, they're going to hate. That's what they grew up with, that's what they're going to know. And so what I would do is I would change the educational system, change the curriculum, put people that are not Palestinians in charge of it. I would offer to change the Israeli curriculum also, me personally, not that this is going to fly within the government, but I would offer to change that so that there would be an overlapping, so that we would learn about Islam and we would learn Arabic and we would learn about, all kinds of things like that, our culture and so on, and they would learn about us a little bit, and then besides that, everybody does their own stuff, according to what they would do. That's what I would do, because I want to create a sphere of understanding. Up until 1987, those of you who visited Israel then, there were the checkpoints anyway. 100,000 people came out of Gaza every day and worked in Tel Aviv, Yerushalayim, and so on. And scores of thousands of Israelis went to the beach, got their cars fixed, did their dentistry in Gaza and in the West Bank. There were no checkpoints. There was nothing. You just drove your car and went. There was nothing at all. First Intifada, that's going to change. The biggest problem with that changing is that now Israelis and Palestinians don't meet. And so if you don't know the other person, anything I tell you about them will be acceptable. Right? If you've never met any Americans, and the Americans have a reputation. being very loud tourists. Right? So if you've never met Americans, so you assume all Americans are very loud tourists. You meet somebody who isn't, and say, well, maybe a lot of them are, but at least there's a few who are. Right? And so as long as you don't know, and all the Palestinians want to kill us, and all the Jews want to kill them. So there needs to be, that place of meeting has disappeared, and it needs to be reestablished. Because ignorance breeds fear, and fear breeds violence. It's nothing unique with us. And I think that should be overcome. There's a whole bunch of other things that could be done, but what I think has to happen afterwards, bottom line, is there needs to be a technocratic system put into place that is severely supervised by some international organization, or maybe set up specifically for this, and that is going to administer the rebuilding of Gaza. Okay? Any other questions? Yes, sir.
You're a realist. Hamas is an existentialist threat. How realistic is it for the Israelis to think that they can eliminate Hamas? Because Hamas is both a political, a social, and a military organization.
Okay. First of all, Hamas is not an existential threat. Hamas can't destroy Israel. They're not the problem. The problem is Iran. I, as a military officer, I am planning how to deal with Hamas, how to deal with Hezbollah in the north, which is funded and trained by Iran, how to deal with the 35 Syrian Shiite militias that are running around Syria shooting at us, which are trained and funded by Iran, how to deal with the militias that are in Iraq, and how to deal with the Houthis. For me, it's all of it. When you look at the news, you see that you think that the only problem is Hamas. Hamas, they're kindergarten compared to the Hezbollah. That's going to be painful. This is nothing. So they're not an existential threat. They're a pain in the tuchus. I caught myself this time. That's number one. Number two is, who is the Hamas? The Hamas is part of the Muslim Brotherhood. Super duper condensed version, Reader's Digest condensed version of everything. The Muslim Brotherhood is a response to the Middle East being taken over by the British and the French. It's founded in 1920. The British and French, the Sykes-Picot Accords and so on and so forth. Muslim Brotherhood, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Boko Haram, and all a very large group of those people. All of them are the same type of theological response, which basically is about Islam has been subdued. How do we get Islam? But Islam is superior to everything else because that's what it says in the Quran. So how do we get back to being the leadership or the to control everything? We have to go back to early Islam, 7th century Islam. The Arabs know that they don't live in the 7th century anymore. So what you have to do is you have to provide an alternative. The last operating base of Muslim Brotherhood is Hamas. They're Sunni. All the other guys I mentioned, they're Shia. Right? They're Sunni. So if we give the people of Gaza and the people of the West Bank an alternative, and a good alternative, then I assume that their support will diminish. One of the problems is what I said earlier, because I don't view Hamas as being an existential threat. The Houthis are much worse for it, in my opinion. Not because they threaten Israel, but what are the Houthis doing? What the Houthis are doing is they are the oldest international agreement in the world is the freedom of maritime traffic. It's a few centuries. The freedom of maritime traffic. Okay, it's a few centuries old. This has been, since it was set in place, casus belli, a reason to go to war. The Houthis are disrupting international maritime traffic, and basically nobody is doing anything at all about it. What are they doing? They're shooting down the missiles once they're in the air. That's not going to stop anybody. The Houthis, who are supported by the Iranians and the Russians and the Chinese, that is going to lead us on the path to World War III. Well, on the path to World War III, unless somebody takes these people to make them accountable. And the international community doesn't have the stomach to make them accountable. This worries me much more. Okay?
Well, how do we neutralize countries like Russia, China, and all the other factions that hates Israel, period? I mean, why can't they be taught, I mean, I know taught you have to teach the children, but why can't there be an intermediary there, or is there an intermediary to neutralize their hatred towards Israel?
Whose hatred?
Oh,
Russia, China, so?
Iran,
Russia and China don't hate Israel. They're completely indifferent to Israel. It's international politics. The Chinese don't care. The Chinese have no problem with Jews, let's say, and they have a problem with Israel because right now they're aligning themselves. It's China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran that are aligning themselves into a bloc, as opposed to the United States, Europe, and us, and Israel. When I was fighting in Gaza, I held in my hands Russian equipment, Iranian equipment, and North Korean equipment. And so that is an issue of international politics, an issue of international interests that has nothing at all to do with Israel. This path that they're heading on, if Israel disappears tomorrow, that changes nothing about the path that the world is going on right now. Europe is busy. Russia invaded Ukraine. Europe is on a buying spree of weapons. That is, Germany doubled its expenditure, or more than that. Poland quadrupled its expenditures.
how about Israel? Israel gets armaments from Poland and Russia and all.
We don't get armaments from Poland and Russia.
No.
No.
Okay.
We get the United States, I must say, no matter what you hear on the television and what the Likud party is saying, what President Biden did at the beginning is probably what avoided the war expanding, and that he sent 2 aircraft carriers and a submarine. Aircraft carriers are more significant. I don't know if you know, but the United States, by far, is the largest military in the world. It has 11 aircraft carriers. The rest of the world has 11. Everybody else can buy. And the United States has been supplying Israel consistently with mainly spare parts and artillery shells, ammunition. They've been doing it consistently from the beginning, as much as they can, because there's also the Ukraine doing it. But and this has less to do with the international politics, but also with the international politics. When I moved to, I was born in New York City. I moved to Israel in 1969. There's a bunch of you who look like you might be old enough to remember 1969. But before 1967, the United States was not Israel's ally. There was an arms embargo on Israel. There was an arms embargo on Israel from the United States.
Oh.
We fought the 6-Day War. We had FN for Brit National. We had FN rifles and Uzis. We had Mirage jets, and all of our tanks we bought on the international market, stuff left over from the Second World War. Israel becomes our ally, the United States becomes Israel's ally. My passport was in Hebrew, Arabic, and French. It wasn't in English. Yossi Banai, those of you who are familiar with Israeli culture, who went to go to travel in the world and learn what's going on in the world, he went to France, and he came back singing in French. He didn't come to America. That was not our cultural reference. That changes after 1967. Why? Because Israel captures the SAM-2 and SAM-3 missile sites complete. The missiles, the wrenches, the books, the cups of tea that the Soviet people were drinking when they were working on these missile sites, and we gave it all to NATO. We gave it to the United States, which gave it to NATO, which means that NATO has the anti-aircraft systems of the Soviets, which means that if there's a Cold War, the Soviets lose before they start. Because it's impossible to fight a modern war without having an effective anti-aircraft system. We do that in 67. We do that in 73. By the time we get to 73, now the Russians are pissed. Why? Because we were using old stuff from the Second World War. The Arab armies were using top quality Soviet stuff, using Soviet doctrine, and they got dragged along the floor. They were destroyed. This becomes a Cold War issue. We fight the war of 73 with Phantom jets, M16s, and Patton tanks. Now America's our ally. We do this again in 73. We give them the missile systems. In 1982, in the war of, that's the first war that I participated in. 1982, we wiped out 15 SAM S-200 missile sites in 3 hours without losing a single aircraft. That means if we know how to do it, that means that the NATO and the United States knows how to do it. That's why America's our ally. I know people who participated both on the Israeli side and the American side for negotiations with Obama over what was going to be the aid packages. And what they told me is that the American security establishment told Obama, give the Israelis whatever they want and don't argue with them. Why? Because Israel provides the United States with intelligence assets and other assets that they said we simply can't get, and even if we could get it, it would cost us so much money and blood and treasure, that's not worth all our while. Let the Israelis do it, and we'll just benefit from it. So what's going on is a much bigger game than just Israel. Israel disappears tomorrow, it doesn't change. It changes my family and so on and so forth, but it doesn't change the international politics. And so there's nothing to do with Russia from that point of view. There's nothing to do with China from that point of view. There's nothing to do with North Korea from that point of view. They don't care. It just works right now to their advantage vis-a-vis the United States. Okay.
Can we end on one positive note? Do you have any personal stories of voluntarism that you've seen or experienced from Israelis to Israelis during these past 6 months? Maybe especially in terms of all those who were rendered homeless.
Okay, so we drafted in one day 360,000 reservists. We have never ever done that. The army is not built to do that. What we thought until now, was that there's going to be an escalation, the Hamas are going to move towards the border, the Syrians are going to do this, we'll call everybody out, we'll train the 99th Division, we'll bring them up, we'll give them all their equipment, we'll send them off to get training, they'll start training, we'll bring in the 98th Division, we'll set them up, and we'll have time to do everything. And we'll move them around and so on. That's not what happened. On the 7th of October, 360,000 people, more than that, but 360,000 people showed up at the front gate of all the military bases. And the army simply wasn't capable of dealing with it. There weren't enough boots to go around, there wasn't enough food, the kitchens weren't set up all of a sudden to feed. Instead, my army base, I'm the 99th Division, on a normal day in the base there's about 300 people. The division is 20,000 people. 20,000 people showed up in one day. Nobody has tomatoes for 20,000 people. Right? You don't have that stuff. You don't have enough dishes out. You don't have enough of anything out. And the Israeli public, my son in the 7th Armored Brigade, he was in Netivot. The women of Netivot would not let them open any tin can. They cooked for them every single day, all day, anything they wanted. People bought trucks, I don't know, they bought them, but they had trucks or whatever. They put washing machines on them, and then they drove into the field where the soldiers were so we could wash our clothes. There was an endless outpouring of food, of entertainers who came to entertain, whatever you might think of, not only in Israel, but also in the international community. I'm going from here to Atlanta, to the Epstein School in Atlanta, Georgia. Those of you are familiar with it, they called me and they said, "What do you need?" And I said, "Okay, I need some of this stuff. How much does it cost?" I said, $10,000. I said, "In 2 days you have the money." I came from a place in Klamath Falls, Oregon. Christians, evangelicals. They, I just left them, and they gave me $25,000 to do whatever I deem important, especially for the people who have been evacuees. Right? There's 300,000 people who are not in their houses. Like my daughter. My daughter lives right next to Gaza. She was married on the 28th of September. Ricky was there. If the Hamas, and we was married outside, in a place very close to where that party, the Nova party happened, if they would have moved it up a week, the Hamas, then Ricky wouldn't be sitting here and I wouldn't be standing. Because that was the big event that was going on that day, and they were looking for who to slaughter, so they would have come and killed us. So there was a tremendous outpouring of things. They set up a whole huge distribution center, and then units could write in and say, "I want this, I want that," and they would, until the army caught up. And now the army takes care of everything. But at the beginning, we never drafted 360,000 people, and even if we did, we never did it in one day. And so they filled that in. I was interviewed during the war by, a few times, because I speak English, by German journalists for some reason. And one of the journalists from the Zeit asked me, "Tell me something happy that happened." And I said, "I don't really know what to say. Even when I'm busy destroying the enemy, it doesn't make me happy. I don't want to blow up a house. I don't want to kill anybody. If I have to, I will, but I don't want to. That's not going to make me happy." She said, "No, you have to think of something happy. You have to think of something happy." And I said, so I was trying to figure it out. And then I said, I have something happy. Have any of you seen Fauda? The TV show Fauda?
Yeah.
Okay. The TV show Fauda, there was an actor called Idan Amedi. Okay, he's one of the actors in the show. He's also an Israeli singer. I wouldn't say that's my generation, and I don't watch television, so I didn't see Fauda, but I know of him. Right? And I met him, so we were, one of the things that I had to do is blow up houses. So I met his team as combat engineers, and I worked with his team for a few days to do what we needed to do. And when I met him, he was actually a really nice guy. He could have been really snobby about it, but he wasn't. He was very down to earth, very practical, very focused on what it is that we needed to do. He was just a really nice guy. That's if there's something that made me smile during this time, and I'm 65, I'm probably 25 years older than he is, something like that. Everybody is 20 years, 30 years, 40 years younger than I am when I'm in the army. And so to see this was actually a nice thing. Another thing that I think was encouraging is that when we went to the army, there was no issue at all about politics. We were focused on dealing with the thing, and we have everybody. It's a draft, right? So a lot of officers around me are religious and have a kippah suga, national religious. There's one of them who went to the yeshiva in LA, which is a it's a really hardcore nationalist yeshiva. They lost 19 people of their graduates, soldiers. But all of us worked relentlessly together without any divisions whatsoever, not discussing any of that, not discussing the politics of it. We just did our jobs, and we did it in unity. Maybe I'll just use that in order to connect to we're in the synagogue. In the parasha last week is Vayakel. So what we had the calf, and then we had the building of the tabernacle, and now this parasha is Vayikra. And so I want to connect these two. The people get together. Moses is God. The people get together, gather themselves together, basically as a mob. So what do we get? We get a golden calf. The same word is used, that vikal, and then Moses comes along, ve'akel. It's the same word, same letters there, just there's a difference in the nikud, in the punctuation, and he brings them together in order to do a task. And he makes them, and he brings them together, and they build the tabernacle. And when we get to Vayikra, it's interesting that when we write the Vayikra of the Aleph is small. Physically, it's smaller than the rest of the word. And it's Vayikra, what? Elohim. God calls Moses to come to the tabernacle. He's hanging out. The cloud is descending upon the tabernacle. He's not going in. They say that the Aleph is written small because he's very modest, anava, and he's waiting for God to call him. And then, only then, does he go forward. The people without leadership made a mess of it all. The people with leadership built the tabernacle, which is going to be the focus of the nation, is going to build us as a Jewish people. And Moses, in his modesty, waits until called upon, and then starts leading the whole thing all over again. And that's kind of what we need. We need true leadership. I don't know if any of you are Bibi supporters. I am not. I think that the government, we need a much better government that can lead us forward. And in any direction, it doesn't really matter to me right now what direction, just leadership. And we need a little bit of modesty. We need a little bit of modesty and understanding that each one of us is part of everything else. I was it 45 years or whatever, years of military experience, 4 wars. Okay, but I can't do anything without everybody else helping me. I can't get the younger officers to listen to me unless I provide to them a dugma ishit, a personal
connection.
What?
Connection?
No, not connection.
Dugma?
Dugma ishit,
Role model.
of what has to happen, and why this has to happen. And if we do that, if we manage to not just gather as a mob, but gather as a people, if we manage to have leadership, and if that leadership is a little bit humble, and there's a purpose, then we'll be able to get through this. We've done it in the past, we can do it all over again.
Almost, do you have a couple minutes to talk about hostages? Can you catch me up on that?
The hostages is a really big issue, as this is from the Mate. On our kibbutz, this says we choose the hostages. And this is the thing that there's a dog tag that was made up without the hostages, and you can, if you look at there's a website, Bring Them Home Now, and you can get these things and the shirts, and you can get them in English also. I least half of them are dead. I assume, I don't know, but I assume that if we get close to them, and we get close to Kasri, Hania, and Def, and all of those people, and they're around them, they will kill them before we get them. I assume that any young women who have been abused, they'll die. They'll kill them, because they don't want this to come out. So, very interesting thing about this, in this conflict of the past 100 years, sexual violence has been very, very little, very little, for a whole bunch of different reasons, which I can explain if you're interested. Except for this. This is different. The Arab world refuses to accept it. There was an incident, there was probably 10 years ago, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, of a terrorist who kidnapped an Israeli woman, and he first raped her, then he killed her. And the Palestinian National Authority refused to do it, because you don't do that. The Arab world refuses to recognize this. So the situation of those hostages is dire. It's 166 days, 167 days. They're underground. For sure there's malnutrition. They haven't been in the sun, which is a problem within itself. A bunch of them are old people. Not to mention, on the 7th of October, there was rape. Now, it could be that underground there's a woman, or more than one, I don't know, I have no idea, but it just makes sense to me, that is pregnant. And she's stuck on the ground, with no medical care, carrying in her womb the offspring of the guy who probably murdered her family also. The world, that's one of those things that the world doesn't do. The world should be holding Hamas to task. The world should be allowing, should say, you guys, you want us to help? You guys want aid? You know what, don't give them back. Let the Red Cross visit them. Just let them visit them. But they're not letting anyone. The Hamas understood what happened after Gilad Shalit. Gilad Shalit was, remember, you know what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. Gilad Shalit was exchanged for 1,027 soldiers. Excuse me, he was exchanged for 1,027 terrorists that were given given over to Hamas. I have no idea what to say. I can tell you that the army and every single soldier down to, I have a nephew who's a paratrooper, and they say, yeah, that's what we're talking about. That's what we're focused on. We want to get we want to release the hostages. But I don't know. I don't know what to say.
I think there should have been a better deal than the exchange they had for 1,027 for one person.
I can't get my dog to listen to me. Listen to me. There's a lot of different issues that are at stake here. And last thing, and Larry mentioned it earlier, in the year 2000, when I went to war for whatever time it was then, my wife was very upset. Then she asked me to write an ethical will for my children. Right? An ethical will, as most of us write regular wills. In other words, who gets the car, who gets the house. That's not, if the most important thing in your life is that you got a Toyota, then there's something wrong. Right? An ethical will is an issue of the values. What it is, if I'm gone, what it is I expect of my children. But what's more important to me was to explain why I'm going. Even though by then I've already been through a whole bunch of wars, I've seen more combat than most people on the planet have seen, thank God, and I've done a whole bunch of things that, whatever. But and by then I knew that it's not a video game. It's not that your arm gets blown off and then you pick up something from the ground and then you get another one with whatever on it. No, you lose your arm, you don't have an arm, you get killed, you're dead. And so I wanted to explain to them why I'm going, what the basis of that is, what is the basis as an individual, and what is it that I expect of them. I guided at some point the United States Marine College. That's the place where the Marines go from kicking indoors to being the guys who send other guys to kick indoors. And I said to them that you guys, each one of you, need to write an ethical will. Not because you're worrying about yourself, but it has to be clear to you under what circumstances you are allowed to send somebody to kill somebody and die. That's what war is about. That's what happens in war. And you have to understand that. You can't send young people to kill and die if it's not clear. And to me, what came of it is this book that now you mentioned earlier. And the name of the book is A Path of Peace in the Field of Battle. I told you, half my life I've spent dealing with peace globally, and half of my adult life I spent being a soldier. And many people ask me, how do I connect these two? To me, it's the same thing. What do I want? I'm a Jew. You guys probably figured that out already. I'm a Jew. I'm not better than anybody, but I'm at least as good as everybody else. And I have a right to live. What do I want? I want security. What's the best security? You live on Kibbutz Gezer. I've never locked my door in my life. That's the best thing. All of my neighbors around me are satisfied and happy. So I don't have to lock my front door. I moved to town. I'll probably have to lock my front door. I moved to a bad part of town. I'll probably have to lock my front door and get a big door. I live in a really bad neighborhood. I'll put on a few extra locks, get another Doberman, and buy myself a gun. So what do I want? I want security. What's the best security? That my neighbor is satisfied. That's what peace work is about. I want them to be happy. I want them to be satisfied. The Bible doesn't say God created Jews and then he created people in his image. No, the Bible says God created us in his image. All of us. That's what I want for them. If I can achieve that, then I can put down my sword. But my whole family was destroyed in the Holocaust. Everything. First relative that I ever found was 10 years ago. From then. My father. So I'm not going to let that happen. I will do everything that is possible in order to make my neighbors happy and provide security that way. If I cannot do that, then I will do everything that I need possible to protect my family and my people. Not because I'm better than anybody, but I'm at least as good as everybody else. And I deserve to live. My daughter, who lives in a kibbutz next to Gaza, deserves to live. It's not complex. It's actually very simple. Okay?
Bravo. The Shabbat after October 7th, we had learned that there was a call to the Tnuah Masortit Beinlaumit, the International Masorti Conservative Movement, to place an empty chair somewhere within the synagogue. And synagogues all over the country, all over the world have done that. And those who come to synagogue, those who join online have seen this, that we've had this. And this was the original list, as best we then knew, in mid-October, of all the hostages. And this is the picture of a man, Yotam Chaim, and unfortunately he died. He's 28 years old, from Kibbutz Kfar Aza, but we adopted him, and he's still here. And for these months, we've been, after a while you start running out of words, and you feel like you're repeating yourself. So we're going to conclude in just a minute with Kaddish. And I ask you to rise in just a minute for the Kaddish, but I want to remind us of something. The Kaddish inside itself isn't sad. It's not one word of sadness in the Kaddish. The Kaddish itself is hopeful. Somebody 1,700 years ago came up with this incredible idea to give people who were mourning a script. And the script is one of hope and peace. And Jewish people all over the world for the past 1,700 years in a variety of ways have been saying the same prayer. But because we've associated it with a relative or a loved one who has died, people tend to think of the Kaddish as, oh, this is sadness. It's not. It's hope. It's peace. In a way, it's optimism and love. So we have to turn our brains 179 degrees and to appreciate what we're saying when we say the Kaddish, along with the sadness and the anguish of having lost so many on October 7th and still knowing people are going to be lost, and remembering our own loved ones as well. But understand this, the Kaddish wants us to walk forward into the future. So we rise now, and of our shul, marking on our calendar, we remember with great love Mary Rossner, Henry Miller, Molly Silver, Nathan Sibley, Rebecca Rips-Gerwich, and recently those whom we've lost, Robert Schreibman, Bert Meisler, Shirley Buckman, Adele Kearns. Are there any other names to mention this evening here? And perhaps those joining at home have a name to share. Elizabeth Lewis. And the Kaddish is on page number 58. Page number 58. You know? Okay. I'm going to rely. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah. Amen. Be'olma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei. B'chaye echon u'v'yom echon u'v'chaye dechol beit Yisrael ba'agala u'v'zaman kariv v'miru. Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach la'olam mal'olmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei dekudesha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran ba'alma v'imiru. Amen. Yehei shalama rabba min shemaya v'chayim oleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imiru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imiru. Amen. And as we conclude, in a minute we'll make the Kiddush and the Motzi, and we also say Shabbat Shalom to those joining in online. We hope to see you in the near future. Come on back. We want to see you in person. Tonight we're going to conclude with the Oseh Shalom, and we're going to sing. Oseh Shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imro amen. Hey ya'aseh shalom shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Hey ya'aseh shalom shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. Ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. Ve'imru